They thought I'd forgotten how to count, how to read a statement, how to notice money slipping through my fingers. But I've been keeping accounts longer than they've been alive. I'm Vivian Ellis, 72 years old, and I've balanced my own books since I was 16. I worked as a bookkeeper for nearly 4 decades, through carbon copy ledgers, clunky calculators, and finally into the age of online banking. Numbers don't scare me. Numbers have been my steady companions in a life full of unpredictable people. But apparently, to my family, that all means nothing now. The first hint came on an ordinary Tuesday. My daughter-in-law, Carla, stopped by unannounced with one of those fixed smiles that never quite reaches the eyes. She brought a pie, the kind she knows I can't eat because of my sugar. "Oh, it's just a little treat," she said, as if I'd been waiting all week for her to grace me with her presence. We sat in my kitchen, the afternoon light pouring in, her eyes scanning the counter like she was inventorying my life. I thought maybe she was just bored, making small talk while her coffee cooled. But then she said it casually, like we were discussing the weather. "Vivian, have you thought about letting us help you with your finances?" I laughed. I actually laughed, because I thought she was joking. I've been independent my whole life. My late husband and I built what we have with careful planning and long hours. But before I could answer, she pressed on. "You know, it's a lot to manage at your age. Bills, bank accounts, investments. It can be overwhelming, and mistakes get costly." The words sat there between us, heavy and condescending. At my age, I wanted to tell her that I could still reconcile an account down to the penny in under an hour, faster than she could figure out a grocery budget. But I stayed quiet. The real blow came 2 days later when my son, David, showed up with Carla again, this time with papers. They called it a family meeting, though no one had asked if I wanted one. David leaned on the back of the chair like he was about to deliver a business proposal. "Mum," he said, "we just think it's best if we take some of the burden off you. You've done so much for us over the years, and now it's our turn." I asked him what kind of burden he was talking about. "Handling money," he said plainly. "You shouldn't have to worry about it. We can take over the accounts, make sure everything's paid on time, invest wisely. That way, you can relax." Relax. As if sitting back and letting them play banker with my life savings would somehow ease my mind. Carla slid the papers toward me. Power of attorney. Full access to all my accounts. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes were sharp. "It's just a formality. We'd never do anything without telling you first." I looked at both of them, studying the familiar faces that had once been my safe place. My son, who I'd raised with scraped knees and late-night homework. His wife, who I'd welcomed into the family with open arms. And I realized, in that moment, that this wasn't about helping me. This was about control. I didn't sign that day. I told them I'd think about it. I smiled, thanked them for their concern, and watched them walk out the door with their pie dish. And as I closed that door, my mind was already working not on how to stop them from taking over, but on how to make sure they'd never get the chance. Because if they thought age had dulled my mind, they were about to learn just how sharp it could still be. 2 days after that little family meeting, my phone rang early in the morning. David's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering, not out of fear, but because I already knew this wasn't going to be a normal call. "Mum," he began, his voice that strange mix of forced cheer and quiet authority. "Carla and I talked about it more, and we think it would be easier if we came over today and just got the paperwork done. That way you won't have to think about it anymore." I told him I had plans. He said, "Well, we'll just come by before that." And that was that. By noon, they were back in my living room, their coats draped neatly over my armchair like they owned the place. David set a leather folder on my coffee table, too fancy for anything good. and opened it to reveal the same stack of documents I'd seen before. Carla smiled, the kind of smile you'd give a child about to take medicine. Vivian, we've already filled in the basics for you. All you have to do is sign. It'll make things so much simpler for everyone. Everyone. As if I wasn't part of that group anymore. I picked up the top sheet and skimmed it, though I already knew what it was. General power of attorney. Full access to every account. Authority to make financial decisions in my best interest. That last phrase made me want to laugh or spit. David sat forward. Mum, you've always been so careful with money. But you know how scams are these days, how complicated online banking can be. We just don't want you to get caught up in something. Carla jumped in before I could respond. And it's not just about protecting you, it's about protecting the family. If something happened, we'd be able to step in right away. Protecting the family. There it was. The quiet suggestion that my life's work was no longer mine to control. That my savings and home and security now belonged to some collective we that had nothing to do with my wishes. I set the papers down carefully. I appreciate the thought, I said, but I'm not ready to hand over everything. David sighed, in that way adult children sometimes do when they forget you once changed their diapers. Mum, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my voice even. David, I've been managing my finances for over 50 years. I'm not suddenly incapable. Carla leaned in. We're just trying to help. You've been forgetting little things lately. Remember last month, when you couldn't find your checkbook? I remembered. I also remembered that she was the one who'd borrowed it, just to write a quick check, and never put it back in the drawer. But I let that one pass. Instead, I said, I'll think about it. David's jaw tightened. All right, but don't take too long. We can't plan around uncertainty forever. They gathered their things, leaving the papers neatly stacked on the coffee table like bait. As the door clicked shut behind them, I didn't touch the folder. I didn't need to. I'd already decided they were never getting their hands on my accounts. But I also knew something important. People who come for your money once will come again, and the next time, they'll be more prepared. If they thought I was just going to sit quietly until they wore me down, they were in for a surprise. Because this time, I was going to be the one doing the planning. The papers sat untouched on my coffee table for 2 days. I didn't move them, didn't even glance their way, though every time I walked past, I felt their presence like a shadow. On the 3rd day, I went to town for groceries. As I swiped my card at the register, the cashier frowned. Declined, she said, like it was my fault. My heart didn't race, not yet, but my mind sharpened. I tried again. Same result. I paid in cash, which I always keep in my purse for emergencies, and drove straight to the bank instead of going home. Marilyn, the branch manager, has known me since my bookkeeping days. She greeted me with a warm smile that faded when she saw my expression. Vivian, what's wrong? I slid my card across the counter. Apparently, it doesn't work anymore. She tapped at her computer, eyes scanning the screen, then her lips pressed into a thin line. It looks like there's been a lot of activity on your account this week. Large purchases, travel bookings, even some wire transfers. Travel? I asked. She nodded. 2 tickets to Cancun, 5-star resort. The number she read out wasn't small. My chest went cold. Who's authorized on this account besides me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marilyn hesitated. David Ellis. So they hadn't even waited. They'd found some old joint account we'd opened years ago when he was in college, back when I was helping him manage his bills, and used that as their way in. I'd forgotten it even existed. They must have dug through my records, found the connection, and decided it was good enough. Marilyn leaned closer, lowering her voice. Vivian, I've seen situations like this before. They start small, then it snowballs. You need to secure your accounts. Her concern was genuine, and it stung. Not because I doubted her, but because hearing it from someone else made it real. I told her I'd handle it, but that I needed a few days. I wasn't ready to tip my hand yet. I wanted to see just how far they would go. Over the next 4 days, I checked my online banking quietly, at odd hours, like I was sneaking into my own life. Each time the numbers had shifted withdrawals, luxury stores, restaurant bills that could feed me for a month. And each time, I wrote them down in a small notebook I kept in the drawer under my phone. On Friday night, I saw a charge for a diamond bracelet. Saturday morning, a rental for a black SUV. Sunday, another plane ticket, this time to Las Vegas. It was like watching termites eat through the beams of a house, slowly, quietly, and with no shame. I never called them. I never confronted them. Not yet. Because there's a rule I learned a long time ago. When someone is digging themselves into a hole, you don't grab the shovel. You just stand back and let them dig until they can't climb out. By Monday, I had enough evidence to fill 3 pages, enough to prove intent, not just accidents or oversights, enough to shut them down completely. And as I closed my notebook that night, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make sure that the next time they thought about underestimating me, they'd remember the day their cards went cold in their hands and the sound of my voice when I finally picked up the phone. The following morning, I was at my kitchen table by 6 a.m., coffee steaming beside me, my little notebook open to the neat columns of dates, amounts, and merchants. I'd always been meticulous, but now every number felt like ammunition. I called Robert Kendall, my lawyer for the past 20 years. We'd navigated my late husband's estate together, and I trusted him more than anyone when it came to protecting what was mine. "Vivian," he said after I explained, "you've done exactly the right thing by documenting everything. The joint account is a weak point, but we can close that gap. More importantly, we can lock down every cent in your name before they have a chance to touch it." I could hear him flipping pages, already pulling forms from whatever file he kept on me. "I'll prepare the paperwork to revoke any lingering authorizations. We'll freeze the compromised account immediately, transfer your funds to a new one with restricted access, and change all your online credentials. But Vivian," his tone shifted, "once you do this, they'll know. There's no going back." "I'm counting on it," I said. Robert chuckled softly, but I could tell he understood. After our call, I rang Marilyn at the bank. We arranged a discreet appointment for Wednesday morning, first slot of the day. She promised to have everything ready for signatures. Then came the hardest part, the waiting. David and Carla stopped by twice that week, all smiles, asking if I'd made a decision yet. Carla even brought a folder of investment opportunities she thought I'd like, complete with glossy photos of vacation rentals. I kept my voice warm, my expression agreeable. "I'm still thinking," I said, as if I were weighing the color of drapes rather than the future of my entire life's savings. Inside, I was cold steel. Each night, I added to my notebook. The Cancun resort payment was followed by spa bookings and private car services. The Las Vegas flight sprouted a string of high-end restaurant charges. They weren't even trying to hide it. On Tuesday night, I took a walk around my garden. The summer air was thick with the scent of lavender, and the cicadas were humming. I thought about all the times I'd helped David the down payment on their first house, the checks for Christmas when money was tight, the little loans I never asked them to repay. And now, here I was, watching them strip my accounts bare under the guise of protecting me. It wasn't just theft, it was arrogance, the kind that assumes you're too old to notice, too tired to fight, too afraid to burn the bridge. But they'd forgotten something. I'd lived through harder years than they could imagine. I'd balanced budgets through recessions, buried a husband, rebuilt a life alone. I knew how to fight without ever raising my voice. Wednesday morning, I dressed in my navy cardigan, the one I wear when I want to look especially composed, and drove to the bank. Marilyn was waiting in her office, papers neatly stacked, her pen uncapped. We worked through each account methodically. New numbers, new passwords, old authorizations revoked. I signed each page with steady hands, the way I'd done 1,000 times before. By the time I left, every cent was locked tighter than a safe. The joint account was closed, the funds moved. My investments were shifted to a separate trust, with me as sole trustee. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for them to step into it. It happened faster than I expected. By Thursday afternoon, less than 24 hours after I'd locked everything down, the first call came in. I let it ring. The second came minutes later, then the third. By the fourth call, my voicemail was full of Carla's voice rising, sharp, but trying to sound calm. "Vivian, there's been some sort of bank mix-up. We're at the store and none of our cards are working. Can you call us back?" I didn't. I spent that afternoon on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the neighbors' kids ride their bikes, the sun dipping behind the maple trees. My phone kept vibrating on the side table, each buzz a little reminder that they were feeling what they'd hoped I'd never feel: helpless. By evening, the tone had shifted. "Mum, it's David. We can't pay for dinner. This is embarrassing. Can you call the bank and sort it out?" I imagined them sitting at a table, the server standing by, the polite but firm look in their eyes as the payment machine beeped in denial. I almost smiled. The next morning, the calls started earlier. Carla again, no pleasantries this time. "Vivian, this is serious. The utility payment bounced, and the mortgage draft didn't go through. If you're having trouble with your accounts, you need to let us help." That last word, help, made me laugh out loud. At 10 a.m., Marilyn called from the bank. "Vivian, just so you know, your son was here this morning. He tried to access your accounts, claimed it was urgent. I told him politely that without authorization there was nothing we could do. He wasn't happy." "I'm sure he wasn't," I said. By noon, David showed up at my door. He didn't knock softly. It was the kind of knock that says the knocker thinks they own the place. I opened it just enough to stand in the frame. "What's going on?" he demanded. "All our cards are declined, the mortgage bounced, and Carla's travel booking got cancelled. Did you freeze the accounts?" I met his gaze evenly. "I secured my accounts." "That's the same thing," he snapped. "No," I said. "It's not. The difference is I secured my money, which, last I checked, is not the same as your money." His jaw worked, but no words came out. Carla stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes darting toward the street like she didn't want the neighbors to see. "Mum, you can't just—" he began. "I can," I said. "And I did. You've been using my accounts without permission. Cancun? Las Vegas? Jewelry? Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Carla's lips parted, ready to deny it, but I held up my hand. "I have every transaction written down, every date, every amount, and I've spoken to my lawyer. If you try to touch a cent again, we'll take this to court." David's face reddened. "We were helping you." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "If that's your idea of help, I'll pass." They left without another word, the tension between them thick enough to see. I watched them go, my hands steady, my heart calm. For the first time in weeks, the balance both in my bank and in my life was exactly where it belonged. But I wasn't done yet. The financial freeze was only step one. By Saturday, the ripples of my little maneuver had turned into full-blown waves crashing over them. I didn't have to imagine the scene word reached me through my friend Joyce, who works at the bistro downtown. She called that afternoon, voice low and amused. "Vivian, you'll never guess who came in for brunch this morning. You're David and Carla, all dressed up like they were about to be photographed for a magazine." I smiled into the phone. "Let me guess. They didn't stay long. Oh, they stayed long enough to order the lobster Benedict and a bottle of champagne. But when the bill came, Joyce paused for dramatic effect. The card machine beeped, declined, twice. Then they tried another one. Same result. The whole table went quiet. I could picture it perfectly. Carla's frozen smile, David fumbling with his wallet, the other diners pretending not to stare while actually watching every second. They left in a hurry, Joyce continued. Cash tip small. Carla's face could have soured milk. After I hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the late afternoon light spilling across the wood. I thought about calling them, but decided to wait. Let them stew a little longer. Let the whispers spread. By Monday, they couldn't hold it in any longer. My phone rang mid-morning. David didn't bother with, "Hello." "This has gone too far, Mum." His voice was tight, brittle. "You've embarrassed us in public. People are talking." I let the silence stretch. "We had friends with us," he added, as if that fact alone should sway me. "And I had a life's worth of savings," I said finally, "before you started treating it like an all-you-can-eat buffet." Carla's voice cut in from the background. "It's not like we were stealing. We just used what was available. We would have paid it back." "Interesting," I said, "because in all my decades of managing money, I've never known to paying it back to involve spa packages and diamond bracelets." David's tone hardened. "You're making a mistake, Mum. We could have helped you manage things. Now you've made it personal." "It is personal," I said, my voice steady. "You went behind my back, used an old account without permission, and drained it like it was yours. You underestimated me. That's the mistake." He tried one more tactic, the wounded son act. "We're family. Family's supposed to trust each other." I leaned back in my chair, the warmth of the teacup in my hands. "Trust is earned, David. And you've spent the last month showing me exactly why you can't be trusted." Carla muttered something I couldn't catch, and then the line went dead. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. The weight that had been pressing on me for weeks was gone. I'd taken back control, and they knew it. Still, there was one more thing I needed to do, something that would make sure they never, ever tried this again. Because freezing the accounts was one thing, but making sure they understood the cost of crossing me, that would be the true lesson. The following week, I met with Robert again, this time in his quiet corner office that smelled faintly of old books and cedar. I slid my notebook across the desk. Every transaction, every date, every amount. He flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. "Vivian, this is airtight. If they try to claim misunderstanding or accident, these records will bury that argument." I told him I didn't want to drag it through court. Not yet. My goal wasn't to destroy my family in public. It was to make sure they understood the terms of our relationship going forward. Robert smiled. "Then I suggest we make those terms legally binding." By Friday, the paperwork was done. I had new accounts, a living trust with me as the sole trustee, and an ironclad clause that no family member could touch a penny without my written, notarized consent. Robert even helped me draft a letter, polite, formal, and impossible to misinterpret, outlining the changes. I mailed it to David and Carla, certified delivery. I wanted their signatures confirming they'd received it. The call came 3 days later. David's voice was low, measured. "So this is it? You've locked us out of everything." "Yes," I said, "and I've documented why. If you try to dispute it, my lawyer will be happy to show a judge the evidence." There was a pause, then a sigh. "We were just trying to—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't insult me with another lie." Silence again. "I'm still your mother," I said, "but I'm no one's bank. If you need help, you can ask, but you'll never again take without permission." He muttered something like, "Fine," before hanging up. The next weekend, I went to the market. As I stood in line, I saw Carla 2 registers over. She glanced my way, then quickly looked down, her cheeks flushed. Her cart was sparse basic groceries, no imported cheeses or bottles of wine this time. It wasn't victory I felt exactly, more like balance, like the scales had finally evened. That night, I sat on my porch with a pot of chamomile tea, the summer air warm against my skin. My accounts were safe, my independence was intact, and my family, whether they liked it or not, now knew that age hadn't dulled my mind, it had sharpened it. I thought back to the day they'd said I was too old to handle money. The irony made me smile, because in the end, it wasn't my years that worked against me. It was theirs, their impatience, their greed, and I made sure they paid for it every declined card, every awkward public moment, every reminder that they couldn't control me. I'll leave them with their pride if they can find it again. But my money, my home, my life, those are mine. And that's how it will stay.